God kills him by mistake, then sends him to a world with 2 kids and op powers. If you dig my recaps, don't forget to subscribe and smash that notification bell. Until a few hours ago, Kayano Takumi was living a normal life in Japan until he was accidentally killed by Sil, the god of wind, and sent to a strange forest where he is now surrounded by monstrous creatures from another world. Faced with C-class red wolves, he pierces the heart of the first one with his air shot ability and repeats the move on the remaining opponent. Frustrated with encountering trouble so soon in this place, he puts the wolves in his inventory to gather materials and survive in this insane world. A short while ago, before stepping into the forest, Takumi found himself in front of a mysterious being who was apologizing without any apparent reason. Completely bewildered, the boy asked what the hell was going on, and the being identified himself as Silpharil, a god, but said he could be called Sil. The god explained that they were in a sacred place, making Takumi think it was a prank, but Sil said outright that he had accidentally killed the boy. Regardless, now Takumi is in the forest and needs to fend for himself. According to Sil, he used his powers to fix a rift in space-time and accidentally hit the human on the other side by overdoing it. To correct his mistake, Sil sent the 28-year-old with a brand new body to Ateldia, a world managed by the god of wind. Basic knowledge of this world, its language, and various other skills were implanted into this body, which is 20 years old. By defeating the red wolves, Takumi leveled up to 3 and now continues his journey to uncover why he ended up there. During his walk, he encounters 2 lost children and tries to communicate with them, but they seem too scared to trust him. Nevertheless, he feels he can't leave them there, and upon hearing their stomachs growling, Takumi takes some food that Sil left in his inventory and gives it to the kid. Initially suspicious, they give in to hunger and devour the food. Seeing their tattered clothes, Takumi finds an outfit for each and invites them to go to the city, but the children don't respond at all. To learn something about them, he uses his status appraisal and notices that they are 5 years old but have no names, so he names the boy Alan and the girl Elena. To Takumi's luck, the twins start following him, so he thinks of making some stops along the way to avoid tiring them out. However, he soon realizes they are not as fragile as he thought when they charge at huge boars and give them a beating. After the initial shock, Takumi asks them to warn him when they're going to run wild like that, and they nod in agreement. Strangely, these kids are doing exceptionally well for such a dangerous forest, and they even obey by warning him of an approaching bear before taking it down. As a reward for following the rules, the twins receive a pat on the head, and at the same time they win over their adoptive father's heart completely. As they continue their journey, Alan and Elena crush anyone in their path, while Takumi stands by with his arms crossed. As the sun begins to set, the adoptive father announces that they will camp there for the night and calls the children to gather some firewood. After preparing the food over a campfire, they all share the meal, and the children seem more at ease than at the beginning. At bedtime, Takumi casts a protective barrier around a tree to shelter the little ones, marking the start of his adventure in Ateldia. At dawn, they arrive at the city, surprising the guards who didn't expect a young man and 2 children to emerge alive from Gaia Forest, a place recommended for rank A. To provide an excuse, Takumi says they came from the countryside in search of medicinal herbs found around that area, so they didn't venture deep into the forest, always keeping a safe distance. The guards accept the explanation and ask for the guardian's identity, but since he has none, the stranger is taken for inspection and processing. First, he receives a magical tool that checks for a criminal record and imagines there won't be any issues, but he worries about the fact that none of the 3 have any identity in this world. Fortunately, everything goes smoothly, and Takumi receives a temporary ID for himself and the kids. If he plans to stay long-term, he needs to get an official ID from the guild. To break the ice, the soldier smiles at the children, but they get scared and hide behind their new guardian. As they walk through the city, Takumi notices that Alan and Elena are afraid of strangers. Later, he visits a shrine of the god of wind and contacts Sil. The human explains that he found 2 children in Gaia Forest and thinks the best course of action is to leave them in an orphanage, causing Sil to freak out upon hearing this. However, it was just a bluff by Takumi to find out that it was indeed the god who purposely put the children in his path. As Sil claims not to know who these children are, Takumi remembers there are 5 gods in this world: the god of wind, fire, water, earth, and the goddess of creation, Marianola. And since Sil is one of them, it doesn't make sense that he wouldn't know who these children are in his territory. Cornered, the god of wind reveals that these kids are not ordinary and that it would be dangerous to leave them alone, hence he relies on the human to take care of them. Despite being annoyed at not being warned, Takumi accepts the proposal and takes his adopted children to find a place to stay for the night. At the inn, the twins can't contain their joy at seeing a warm and comfortable bed, so they take the opportunity to jump around and burn off the remaining energy before falling asleep. At dawn, Takumi receives a good morning from Alan and Elena, the first time they've spoken. He was worried about their reaction to arriving in the city with so many strangers around, but it seems things will be smoother than he thought. Soon he announces that he will take them to the Adventurers Guild. Once at the guild, Takumi is welcomed by Luna and asks to be registered as an adventurer along with the little ones, since there is no minimum age requirement. After filling out the forms, Takumi is enchanted by the guild, but Alan and Elena still seem hesitant. The person in charge reassures them that everything will be fine and they have nothing to fear. Shortly after, the cards are ready and Takumi discovers that they can be used as identification. Besides this, he sees that he has reached level 11 after what he did in the Gaia Forest. The receptionist explains that there are ranks ranging from F to SS, but currently there is no one in the highest category of the institution. Additionally, she emphasizes that it's allowed to form groups for missions, and the team's rank will be the average rank of all its members. Regarding the workflow, Takumi needs to choose a job from the board and take it to the reception before carrying it out. Once done with the mission completed, it's possible to sell the items obtained right there in the guild. Speaking of which, Takumi says he wants to form a group, and the receptionist informs him that the team needs a name. Thinking about it, the newest adventurer looks at the children and sees them as angels, so he names the group White Wings. With that done for their first mission, Takumi takes the simplest job of collecting 10 lily herbs within 3 days. Wasting no time, the White Wings group heads to their objective location, a forest where only weak monsters like slimes appear. With this, the person in charge feels secure enough for them to work without major concerns. Then, upon seeing the first lily herb, he calls the kids to take a look and teaches them how to harvest the plant without damaging it. With that said, Alan and Elena proceed to repeat the boys' actions, each returning with a herb in hand, earning another head pat from Takumi. In no time, they accumulate a large quantity of these herbs, and the receptionist doesn't know what to do with the amount, highlighting that it's very difficult to gather so much in such a short time. Takumi explains that the kids worked hard for this task, so Luna gives them the reward. Takumi praises the children and says that they earned this money through their own effort. Suddenly, a man arrives and gets angry about having kids in the Adventurers Guild, saying this is no place for games, but Takumi stands his ground and confronts the man. Luna tries to control Dominic, but he loses it and grabs Takumi. At the same moment, Alan and Elena react by kicking the aggressor in the stomach, but just as they were about to finish the man off, Takumi intervenes to prevent the worst. Concerned, the boy asks the receptionist if there's any punishment for the trouble they caused, but she says they acted in self-defense. Shortly after, the same guard who received them at the gate arrives to clean up the mess, and Luna tells Takumi that the kids are crying. Worried, he asks what's going on, and they express their fear of being abandoned after what they did. With that, Takumi hugs the children and promises that he will never leave them behind. Explaining to the guard what happened, the adventurer tells him about the fight with Dominic and states his name. Likewise, the soldier introduces himself as Granvalt Lowen, the second captain of the Shireen branch of the Guardian Knights. Upon learning that the children cried out of fear of being abandoned, the officer asks if the young man could really do that, which deeply offends him. Takumi then explains that Alan and Elena are not his children, and that he found the twins in the Gaia Forest, but doesn't know if they were left behind or got lost there. Hearing this, Luna remembers that a group of slave traders from the kingdom of Argo was attacked by monsters near the Gaia Forest, and Granvalt fears that the little ones were used as bait to distract the monsters while the traders escaped. Takumi asks if he can keep the two, and the soldier knows well that the children have already grown attached to him, so he recognizes the young man as responsible for the lost twins. The guard was about to say that he can be called Vault, but Luna, being a fan of expeditions to mysterious places, steps in to find out what kind of materials Takumi managed to collect from the Gaia Forest. Takumi mentions that he gathered parts of red wolves, and Vault asks the young man to sell them to this woman because she is obsessed with quality materials. Fortunately, besides being obsessed, Luna pays pays well for the materials she buys, so Takumi and his children were duly rewarded for their efforts with a good amount of money. Next, Captain Vault remembers that he came to talk to the guild master about the expedition they usually conduct in the Gaia forest to reduce the number of monsters, but laments the fact that rank adventurers are scarce because that's the level of strength such a dangerous forest demands. To make up for this shortage of manpower, Vault summons Takumi. The rookie tries to explain that he just registered for rank F, but the captain knows that the guy came out unscathed from the forest carrying Red Wolf's materials, so he can very well handle the situation. With this, the adventurer realized that he messed up by mentioning the wolves. Be that as it may, Vault heads toward the guild master, ignoring any justification Takumi might have given to avoid joining the expedition. In front of the master, the officer asks for Takumi Kayano, a rookie, to be part of the group that will enter the Gaia forest. The master finds it strange to have a rookie on such a high-level mission, so Vault explains that not every rookie is necessarily inexperienced. Less than a month after Takumi arrived in the world of Ateldia, he had already gotten used to everything. Even Alan and Elena, who used to be shy around people on the street, were now starting to open up and interact better with their surroundings. The White Wings group, formed by the three of them, continued their adventurous saga, working 2 days and resting one. One morning during breakfast, Takumi felt that something was missing from the bread he was eating. In this world, there are 3 types of bread: white, black, and whole grain. All 3 are simple and tasty, but the boy really missed the sweet breads and those with extravagant fillings from his original world. Since they weren't available there, he decided to create these fillings himself. With this in mind, they went to the Golden Wheat shop, where they were greeted by the young Michelle. Since Takumi wanted to make a special request, her father Rode came to assist. Takumi placed a jar of jam and another of vanilla cream on the counter and had to explain what they were to the baker, who was unfamiliar with these foreign products. Takumi wanted Rode to make bread using these ingredients. Rode found it strange, considering he had never made anything like it, nor used anything inside the bread. Nonetheless, Takumi offered to show him how it was done. Donning an apron and all, the young man demonstrated the simple procedure, just making the dough and folding it over the filling. As if the man had discovered a new world, Michelle and her father were in shock, and soon the baker showed his expertise by perfectly replicating the boy's technique. Rode called his daughter to help with the vanilla cream, and Alan and Elena eagerly volunteered to join in. The baker was very friendly and got into the spirit with the kids, even roping Takumi in to get hands-on. Taking the opportunity, Takumi introduced Anko, a sweet paste made from cooked red beans. The hours flew by and night fell, with everyone still working together to produce the new breads. The activity was so enjoyable that no one noticed the time passing, and after all their efforts, the breads finally came out of the oven. Upon tasting the new creations, Rode and Michelle were delighted with the flavor. Impressed, Rode asked Takumi if he could sell these breads in his bakery in exchange for a share of the profits, but the boy didn't care about the money as long as he could buy the breads. Takumi knew this kind of thing was normal in his world, so he didn't want to take advantage, as if he had invented the recipes. With this, Rode celebrated and began imagining experimenting with new recipes using the new ingredients. The next day, the White Wings received the news that they had risen to rank E, and Takumi celebrated reaching level 13. According to Luna, the guild receptionist, it's very difficult for a novice to level up so quickly. Proud, the girl told the kids that it was all thanks to their hard work, and they beamed with pure joy upon hearing the compliment. Speaking of which, Luna offered Takumi a labyrinth to explore, since he now had permission to take on more difficult missions. According to the knowledge that Syl had placed in Takumi, there are 108 labyrinths in this world. Luna mentioned that near Shireen there was a 15-floor underground labyrinth, and since there weren't many high-value monsters around, the city adventurers often made expeditions to this dungeon to earn money. Takumi urged the kids to set off immediately, but Luna warned that this cave was half a day's walk away plus several days to complete the expedition. Anyway, Takumi only planned to check out the first floor, or maybe the second, to see what it was like. Luna was worried he might want to go deeper into the labyrinth, so Takumi pretended that such a thing wasn't expected of someone of rank E. However, he had every intention of exploring as far as he could, and in no time was already already on the 3rd floor. With Alan and Elena guiding him correctly, the young man had a real GPS in hand to avoid getting lost even once. Takumi admitted it was a bit strange how they always pointed in the same direction at the same time, but he figured it was one of those twin things. Accessing his menu, Takumi read that this place was known as the Earth Labyrinth, where only monsters adapted to this environment appeared. Speaking of which, a mole popped up in front of the group. Takumi urged the kids to take it easy, but they had already taken down the poor creature before he finished his sentence. As the animal vanished, Takumi explained that this is what happens in labyrinths when a monster is defeated and an item is left in its place, potentially very strong and even rare items. That said, the twins ended up finding a mere mole whisker, which Takumi didn't know if it was useful for anything other than dental floss. In no time, Alan and Elena were more than comfortable in the dungeon, curious about everything they found. At one point, Takumi pulled out his magical stove from the inventory to make dinner, so the White Wings cooked a horo bird soup with lots of vegetables. After the meal, the adventurer set up the same tent with his magic and slept hugging the two little ones. When they woke up, they kept the same pace, clearing the cave's corridors and using the meat from defeated monsters to replenish their energy. A few days later, they had already reached the 10th floor, where Takumi found a treasure chest but warned the kids that it could contain either something amazing or a trap, so they needed to be careful. To ensure he wouldn't put the little ones at risk, he assessed the chest before opening it. Wasting no time, the two rushed to pull the handle and revealed 2 potions, one yellow to increase physical resistance and the other purple to restore mana. Since they were low-level items, they probably weren't worth much. Suddenly, Alan and Elena noticed a monster approaching from behind their guardian, so they lunged at the monkey and delivered a double flying kick, finishing it off with a hit kill. The dropped item is wild ape fur, which was the most valuable item so far. Given this, Takumi realizes that the senses and combat skills of these two are incredible, along with the confidence to advance against any threat without hesitation, which seems more like instinct than a well-thought-out strategy. However, this instinct could cause problems if a truly strong monster appears in front of them, and that must be what was worrying Syl. Speaking of which, a clay snake appears before the twins, so the father asks the children to step back because it's a poisonous snake. They comply without issue, so Takumi takes the opportunity to test his throwing skill with a stone from the ground. Stunning the monster with a throw, he uses Wind Cutter to finish the fight. Next, giant bees appear. This time, the boy lets the kids handle the situation, but asks them to be careful of the bee's stinger. For the first time, they face creatures that are not easily hit by their blows until they resort to throwing from a distance and surprise their father because the stones gained such incredible force that they almost brought down the ceiling. Nevertheless, the bees remained intact, so Takumi stays alert in case something goes out of control. The twins continue to chase the bee, but without much seriousness, as they see it as a game, and Takumi knows this well, so he doesn't pressure the children to act like fighting dogs. While they play, the adventurer organizes the items he has gathered so far, like earth, spider web, and slime jelly. Meanwhile, the children finally defeat the giant insects, earning honey portions as a reward. Considering these are valuable items in Ateldia, Takumi allows the children to eliminate any bee that's buzzing around in the dungeon. And so Alan and Elena head to the next round. After so much work, by late afternoon, they had enough items to make the best meal so far, even using the obtained honey as the cherry on top for a grand finish. With this, Takumi serves perfect French toasts to the kids, which they love at first bite. Suddenly, more bees appear in the room during the meal, so Takumi leaves the children eating and takes on the responsibility himself. With a simple air shot, he destroys the unwanted pair, but more bees kept coming, attracted by the smell of honey. Speaking of this food, since the twins loved it, they decide to take care of the rest of the swarm to get as much as they could. At that moment, Takumi realized that this could make good money. As days pass, they reach the 15th floor, the last of the labyrinth, where a gigantic door makes Takumi think that's where the boss is. Upon entering, they see a giant worm, making the adult question if this is some kind of joke. Be that as it may, worm or not, the creature is gigantic, and certainly the gate behind them won't open again unless this creature is defeated. Takumi tries the Wind Cutter against the worm, but it's quick and dodges the attack. Moreover, the boss could use magic, so it responds with sandballs towards the human. With 4 air shots, Takumi destroys the spheres that concentrated the enemy's spell and uses Wind Arrow to defeat the giant worm. Certainly, this fight wasn't what the boy expected, but it was what he got for the day. Either way, it's strange for a novice to defeat a labyrinth boss in seconds, so he begins to suspect that the skills Syl passed on to him are somewhat overpowered after all. With the worm dead, a fang a magic stone, and the creature's meat are dropped, which Takumi supposes no one will care about. With everything resolved, his adopted children pat his head, praising him for the good job, just as the father does with the kids. Upon opening the gate of the room, they come across a device capable of returning them to the first floor instantly, along with a treasure chest. Inside were explosive flame spheres, which explode after someone puts magic into them and moves away to a certain distance like a grenade from Takumi's original world. Alan and Elena play with the explosives, but the boy doesn't think it's a good idea, so he quickly stores the spheres. Days later, they finally see the sun again and prepare to return to the city, but a fierce wolf appears on the way. Looking closer, the boy notices it's a Fenrir he gained through a pact he doesn't even remember making, so he imagines it's Syl's doing. Immediately, the Fenrir interacts with its owner as if it had been his partner for years, and even the children start imitating the lupine's gestures. Since the animal needed a name, Takumi suggests Jewel, and the kids approve. However, upon approaching the city wall, the father warns that he can't take Jewel because it might scare people, so he asks the lupine to stay within his shadow using shadow magic that packed beasts can offer. Without delay, Takumi visits Syl, who shows a much higher level of affection than the human expected. Without paying much attention to that over-the-top reception, Takumi asks about the packed beast, but it wasn't the god of wind who gave the Fenrir. It was a vassal of the god of water as a form of gratitude. Looking closely, Alan and Elena indeed have water-oriented abilities, so it makes sense. Not to be left behind, Syl forces Takumi to take a bunch of rewards home, along with giving directions to a plane where they should go to get another packed beast. So after this meeting, after days sleeping on a cave floor, the White Wings get a well-deserved day of rest in a real bed. The next day, arriving at the plane Syl indicated, they come across not just one beast, but two. One of them was of the flying tiger species, an S-rank monster that controls the wind and flies freely through the skies. The other was a thunder hawk, a golden hawk that uses thunder magic and possesses enviable speed. As for their names, Takumi decided to call the Tiger Feet and the Hawk Bolt. In fact, Syl had already sent the collars for the animals, so they were all properly equipped and domesticated to join the White Wings. To avoid any issues among other people, these collars can shrink along with the pets, making them look like kittens and puppies. The children were intrigued by the collars and asked to wear them too, so Takumi explained that it wasn't a good idea for them to use such accessories, as people would look very strangely at an adult with kids wearing pet collars in the street. Alan and Elena were sad they couldn't share the pet's accessories, so the guardian gave them necklaces with angel pendants, which are resistant to magical attacks. Besides that, they got the pursuit ring, which reveals the user's position on a map. Finally, he gifted each of them with a magical pouch so they could collect items during their adventures. With everything done, Takumi announced it was time to return to the city, so he called back Bolt and kept Feet and Jewel in their smaller forms. Once they arrived, Elena was enchanted by a shop window full of plush animals, so Takumi took the kids inside the store. He asked the saleswoman if the available ribbons could be used as hair decorations, and for 50 gold coins each he bought the ribbons to style Elena's hair. When she saw her transformation in the mirror, it was love at first sight. Seeing how happy she was, he asked her to choose another ribbon, and Elena picked a black one because it's the color of her father's hair. The saleswoman asked if the girl chose that color because she loved her dad, and she confirmed with a yes, making Takumi very pleased. Then he asked Alan if he wanted anything, but he felt that kind of ribbon didn't match his style, so he shook his head. Seizing the festive mood, the saleswoman asked to try some new clothes on the kids, and soon they were showing off their charm with the shop's most modern outfits. Takumi asked if the woman made all those clothes herself, and she confirmed, as she also did sewing work. Among all the clothes, the twins liked the ones with animal ears the most, so Takumi bought them to please his children. At night, while the kids were sound asleep, their guardian was thinking about something cool to buy for Alan, just like he did for Elena, so he started to ponder what would be nice to give a boy. In his childhood, Takumi only received things that don't exist in this world, like video games, toy cars, flyers and trading cards, so he felt lost trying to find something suitable. The next day, he was woken up by his children's usual excitement, now with the added fun of having animals join the party. Today, the anticipation was even higher because it would be the first day they would go on an expedition to Gaia Forest with Vault. To complete this mission, the White Wings had to reduce the number of monsters posing a threat to the forest by investigating nests and eliminating them. When they reached the captain, the children became a bit shy again, especially when a stranger approached their father to introduce himself as the vice captain. His name was Isaac Risner, and he seemed welcoming of the adults' participation, but questioned whether the children would really be safe in a hostile, rank environment. Vault tried to break the ice, commenting that the kids were stronger than they looked, but Alan and Elena reacted by hiding even more behind their guardian's legs. Takumi apologized for the children's shyness and tried to encourage them to come out of their shells, but it seemed it would take some time for them to lower their guard. In any case, Vault announced they would use carriages to get to Gaia Forest and asked everyone to board, but Takumi noticed someone staring at them strangely. Sensing his children's feelings, he realized they had also picked up on some hostility, presuming it was because some adventurers didn't accept the presence of children on such expeditions. On the way to the mission, Isaac explained it would take about an hour to reach the forest, so Takumi told the kids it might be a boring ride, but they were fine with it. Two adventurers started to encourage the children, saying they looked forward to working as a team with the little ones, which left them looking astonished, as if feeling the weight of responsibility on their shoulders. As the carriage moved, Takumi felt they were getting more comfortable, much to his relief. Soon they arrived at the edge of Gaia Forest, and Vault announced his 5-day hunting plan, with each of the 3 battalions taking different routes to reach the camp. First, the captain introduced Takumi to the group of adventurers joining the cavalry. Their leader was Rudolph from Dragon Breath, who was eager to work with all the expedition members. The girl was named Iris, while the boy in the green shirt was Gilm, and the one in blue was Zack. Rudolph was in a rank, so Takumi was impressed and eager to work with such a high-level adventurer. With that, Vault called everyone to set off, and along the way the twins demonstrated their perceptive abilities by identifying the presence of nearby enemies. Takumi warned that a monster was coming from the left, even though no one else could see it. Ironically, Gilm's detection magic, which relied on a magical signal, failed to pick up anything, while the twins' pure perception was far more effective at sensing nearby hostilities. After a while, Gilm finally detected the presence, and the group went into combat mode. Soon, a red wolf emerged from the forest, startling the adventurers. However, unlike the others, Alan and Elena were delighted by the animal's presence and ran to play with it, which reminded Takumi that he had forgotten to tell them to stay quietly in a corner. Alan kicked the beast, followed by Elena, and the two of them together defeated the enemy in mere seconds, leaving everyone in awe. As usual, Takumi patted the children's heads to praise their victory, but asked them to rest and let the others have a turn at hunting as well. Meanwhile, Vault wanted to know what he had just witnessed, since red wolves are rank sea creatures, and their father mentioned the day when the twins took down an adult man at the Adventurers Guild. Although it was indeed an impressive scene, the captain thought it had only happened because the man had let his guard down. He didn't believe these kids were true killing machines capable of taking down wild beasts with just a kick. As he had mentioned before, Takumi recalled finding the twins in Gaia's forest, which left the adventurers in shock at the fact that 2 kids had survived in such a dangerous forest. This explained a lot about the impressive strength the 2 little ones displayed. Amidst all this, Syl was observing the journey and regretted having put Takumi in this situation. All he could hope for was that the one sent to this world would succeed in his mission. He prayed to the gods for the trio's safety. Alan and Elena threatened this safety by suddenly running into the forest, prompting their father to chase after them to see what had happened. It turned out they had found spirit grass, a medicinal herb with magical properties that also serves as an ingredient for potions. Despite receiving more head pats for finding the item, Takumi reminded them again that they couldn't run around the forest like crazy, but with their sad, adorable faces he gave in and let them take a stroll deeper into the woods. Soon they found slimy rock moss, an effective remedy for itching, but one that could cause rashes if it came into direct contact with the skin. Isaac remembered when his captain used this moss to treat his itching fits. Vault got excited to collect as much of this ingredient as possible, but before he could touch it, Isaac warned him about the rashes and scolded his superior, pointing out that even the children were smarter for calling an adult before touching the plant. Takumi found this dynamic between the two odd, but one of the adventurers explained it had always been like that. To make matters worse, the scoldings seemed to last over an hour, so Takumi called the kids and asked them to do something discreetly. The twins pulled Isaac's cloak and handed him a bag of the moss, making the vice captain overjoyed with the gift from the little ones, which made him forget to reprimand Vault. Once again, Alan and Elena restored peace with their varied skills. However, peace was short-lived as a high orc approached accompanied by 6 smaller orcs. Rudolph committed to dealing with the chief enemy, while Takumi also joined the fight. Vault doubted Takumi could handle an orc, but the boy proved otherwise by taking down one of the monsters with his classic wind cutter. At the same time, the captains fought off the rest of the orcs and Rudolph battled their leader. After the victory, Vault demanded an explanation of how the supposedly inexperienced adventurer had annihilated an orc in a single move. The twins didn't like the captain's approach and glared at him like angry dogs. Nonetheless, the man discovered that Takumi's rank F was a sham and suggested Rudolph adjust the boy's rank once they returned to the Adventurers Guild. Takumi didn't understand how Rudolph could raise his rank just by asking, so Rudolph explained that a recommendation from a higher level adventurer was enough for the guild master to raise someone's rank depending on the case. Returning to the recent battle, the A-rank adventurer noted that many orcs were at the forest's edge and that the atmosphere around was oddly calm. Isaac shared the same concern, as it was rare for such a group of monsters to be there, considering it a bad omen. With a serious face, Vault announced a full investigation would be conducted until the twins interrupted and asked their uncle for a cool snack. During the meal, the captain questioned how Takumi had obtained ghost bread named for its extreme rarity in bakeries. Takumi explained that the baker had made it personally for him, leaving Vault envious enough to ask the children for a bite. When they refused, their guardian had no choice but to provide another loaf for the big kid, deciding to share it with the entire expedition team. Later, they saw a red flare in the sky and hurried to check the emergency. To get there faster, Takumi used wind magic and carried Alan and Alina with him. Lurking, they spotted 4 blood wolves chasing another group of humans, a more advanced race than the Red Wolf. With injured people in the field, Takumi decided to debut his water katana and fought the wolves alongside the twins. The victory was so swift that the rest of the team arrived with everything already resolved. Surprised to see that Takumi was much stronger than he had imagined, Vault teased that the boy was too skinny to seem so powerful, causing the children to growl at him again. Afterward, Takumi and the children sensed another dangerous presence, this time even more powerful. At night, the soldiers set up camp and prepared the food, which Takumi didn't think was a great idea since their cooking skills left much to be desired. Constantly, Takumi scolded the cooks to make sure they did things right, like putting less meat in the pot at a time and making a sauce to boost the flavor. Vault reminded him that they were soldiers, not participants in Master Chef, so Takumi decided to take on the task himself, as one of his priorities was feeding the children. With that, he took on the role of head chef, guiding the cooks to make the most spectacular meal possible. At dinner, everyone acknowledged that the meal was magnificent, and Takumi let out a smug little chef's laugh. The problem was that the next day the entire camp looked at him with expectation, so he ended up having to make breakfast as well. In the midst of this, he felt that eerie sensation of being watched once again, just like his children, who were visibly frightened by it. Knowing the situation, Takumi hugged both kids and kept his eyes wide open. Sharing the feeling with the soldiers on their march, Vault agreed that something was wrong with the forest, and Rudolph noted that few monsters were being found. During this time, the third captain of the garrison introduced himself to Takumi as Farius Tierra, and Takumi remembered that this officer led the unit that was surrounded by the bloody wolves. Farius emphasized that since then he decided not to let his guard down for a minute, although so far they hadn't encountered any more monsters on their way, which everyone said was extremely unusual, especially in the deepest part of the forest. Takumi was more concerned with the unsettling feeling of being watched, especially since it was affecting the twins. The sensation distracted him so much that only the children noticed a giant snake nearby, an evil viper. Immediately, the snake attacked with its full size, stirring up dust from the ground like a tornado with its weight. As it crushed soldiers, Takumi tried to hold on to Elena and Alan and launched a wind cutter at the creature, but it dodged. Farius used Earth Needle to contain the threat for the moment, raising giant stakes of earth and rock around the serpent. Rudolph assumed this animal was responsible for driving away all the forest monsters and ordered the wounded to stay clear of the front line to avoid hindering the battlefield's movement. Vault joined the command and told Isaac to remove the injured, while Takumi asked the children to stay out of the fight. Rudolph called his partners to join him, but their weapons had no effect on the resilient hide of the evil viper. Additionally, the attacks didn't slow down the animal's momentum, which continued to attack and destroy more men around it. The expedition captain saw his men falling one by one, and to make matters worse, the snake was heading toward the wounded. To prevent disaster, Takumi timed it perfectly to cut down a tree and drop the trunk in front of it, delaying its advance. Vault attacked with a flaming sword, but it didn't work. Iris and Gilm cast wind and fire spells, but nothing seemed enough to damage the monster. To make matters worse, when he noticed Takumi saw the children clinging to the monster, so he grabbed a dagger from his inventory and threw it directly into the snakes, making it suffer for the first time in the battle. However, that unsettling sensation returned, distracting Alan and Elena, who were struck by the powerful tail of the serpent. As Iris went to rescue the children and they got up easily, Rudolph reassured their father that they were fine, so Takumi took the opportunity to ask the warrior to distract the evil viper until he could invoke an advanced wind spell. Throughout his life, Takumi had never managed to use this spell, but for some reason now he felt capable. For this to happen, he asked for the coverage of Rudolph's group, who led the front line against the viper. While casting the spell, Takumi saw almost all his mana concentrating in front of him, making him question if he had enough power to complete the process. Feeling ready, the young adventurer ordered everyone to move away from the snake, then launched the wind edge at it. Amidst the chaos of light, dust, and wind that formed on the battlefield, everyone could see the body of the evil viper being shattered by such a powerful spell. The problem was that not only the snake's parts were cut in half, but the trees also met the same fate, and now they began to fall among the soldiers. After all the devastation, Rudolph thanked the adventurer for his life-saving magic and pointed out that the blood of the evil viper was a valuable material, so they should collect as much as possible before it all drained away. The children hugged their uncle, saying he was the best, bringing a smile back to his face after the tense moments. He worried about the two being hurt, but they joyfully affirmed they were fine. For this reason, he thanked Iris for the healing, but she explained that they had suffered very little from the blow, so it wasn't much worse. Still, it was necessary to keep an eye on them because other bruises might appear later. That said, Takumi discovered that Alan and Elena were not only strong with their fists, but also extremely resistant to brutal attacks like those of an evil viper. If they were ordinary children, they would certainly be worse off. Speaking of this, Takumi needed to ensure that this would never happen. Meanwhile, the feeling of being watched returned to bother the adventurer. This time, instead of remaining passive, Takumi approached one of the soldiers and threw him to the ground, forcefully pointing his sword at the man's neck. The captain, not understanding why Sages was attacked, demanded explanations from the adventurer, while the attacked man claimed he had done nothing. Takumi found the soldier's assertion ironic, given that he had been looking at the adventurer with such murderous intent. Rudolph confirmed that he had also seen this happening, since they all gathered and despised the man for having this behavior toward the expedition's savior. As the children got hurt, it's no surprise that Takumi is furious and won't let it slide. This explains the more aggressive behavior he's showing right now. Still, Sages keeps insisting that he did absolutely nothing, but Takumi isn't buying it and confronts him head-on. Seeing no way out, the knight shouts that it's all because of this commoner who keeps drawing Captain Vault's attention. With that, Takumi looks at the captain, who turns his head away to avoid responsibility, leaving the vice captain to explain that this man is Sages Clance, who has publicly declared his love for Vault. Takumi assumes it's a love born of respect, but Isaac clarifies that it's another kind of love. Vault breaks his silence, admitting he's interested in other men. Sages then argues that since the captain isn't currently in love with any brunette, he should give the dark-haired man a chance. hands. After this altercation, Isaac apologizes for dragging the adventurer into all this, and Farius demands punishment for the soldier who caused the children's injuries. However, Takumi takes responsibility, stating he ignored the situation for too long, which led to the problem. He assures everyone that if it happens again, he won't be so lenient. After this conversation, Rudolph seizes the moment to tell Takumi that he's starving after the whole ordeal, but the boy isn't in the mood to cook after everything that's happened, especially since he feels other soldiers might be involved in the bad vibes he's getting. Nonetheless, the children are very excited about the idea of eating with the soldiers, which convinces Takumi to make an extra effort to cook for the little ones. He then asks for the garrison's help and personally requests Rudolph to help dismember the orc. During the preparation, the kids accidentally break the eggs on the table, so Takumi reassures them that they'll get better with time. Since they seem upset about their mistake, he uses Iris as an example, who is already an adult and made the same blunder they did. With the food ready, Alan and Elena can finally eat well and rest from the intense battle earlier against such a threatening enemy. Taking advantage of the free time, Takumi checks his status and sees he has reached level 25, earning new spells through the packed beasts, as well as a water magic spell he doesn't yet understand but assumes was added by Syl. At this moment, Vault apologizes for today and ruffles the two little ones' hair to reward them for their hard work. Showing his gratitude, the captain deeply thanks the trio of newcomers and announces the end of the expedition, surprising everyone. He explains that many soldiers were injured and it would be risky to continue the journey this way. This also means that Takumi and the children have completed their mission and can collect the reward at the Adventurers Guild. The next day, when Takumi returns to the guild to see Luna, the receptionist is incredibly happy to see him again and immediately pulls the three to meet someone. It was the guild master of Shireen Adventurers, Johan. Getting straight to the point, Johan says he was informed by the expedition captains that Takumi shouldn't stay in his current rank. Being honest, the master doesn't believe the boy is that strong despite showing some capability. But since it was a recommendation from trusted knights of the kingdom, Johan is willing to promote Takumi straight to rank A. With Luna's excitement, the local guild master highlights that the adventurer was able to defeat a bloody wolf and an evil viper all alongside these children, who also proved their strength. Actually, if Johan doesn't also raise the children's ranks, even if it's to rank a, Takumi won't be able to take on tougher jobs due to Alan and Elena's lower rank, which would significantly lower the group's average rank. Considering this, Takumi asks if it's possible to raise the children to rank D, but Johan promotes them to C so Takumi can take on rank B missions. Later, during the promotion, Luna discovers from the guild card that Takumi conquered the Earth Labyrinth, as achievements are recorded in each adventurer's documentation. With no way out, the boy admits he did pass through there, so the clerk informs him that he set another record, but Takumi prefers to keep this a secret and asks for it not to be publicized, as drawing attention is the last thing he wants, considering it might bring trouble for the children. Agreeing on this, Luna hands over the promotion credentials along with the reward and then asks the adventurer to show any material he might have obtained. When she goes to fetch the key to her storage, Takumi tells the kids that they now need to find a place to put the giant snake. Leaving the huge creature's body in the middle of the guild, he negotiates with Luna on how much she or the guild would want from the evil viper, and it's decided that he will keep 1/3 of the skin and meat and give the rest to the guild. Luna is overjoyed with this news, and according to Takumi, all he needs is food and equipment for himself and the children. Besides that, he has various items from the Gaia forest he wants to sell to the girl, and she is amazed by the variety of materials in front of her. Leaving the guild, Takumi is exhausted while the kids are full of energy. Nonetheless, he manages to convince them to stay at an inn, and he quickly falls into a deep sleep. As the sky begins to brighten the horizon, Takumi lies peacefully on the green grass of the field, lovingly watching the children play with the animals. At one point, he becomes curious about the interaction between the twins and the pets, so he goes over to find out what's going on. The boys were trying to teach the animals to speak, and even though he didn't know if that was possible, their father encourages them to try. Speaking of teaching, using the reward White Wings earns from his missions, Takumi gets the boys to count the coins, explaining the difference in value between copper, silver, and gold coins, which also depend on size for their worth. Taking advantage of the kids' eagerness, he asks them to collect coins that total 54 gold. Alan and Elena put their heads together and calculate the necessary amount. With that, Takumi keeps making the challenges harder, showing that he doesn't neglect his responsibility to educate the little ones about things in life that don't necessarily involve being an adventurer. Speaking of which, after these math exercises, it's time to go shopping. Looking around as if it were an amusement park, the twins are enchanted by the merchants offering their goods such as plants to beautify the house or fresh vegetables to fill their bellies. At the fruit stand, the seller greets the little ones kindly, so Takumi asks Alan to choose the food he wants, not forgetting to say please. Alan asks for 5 sure fruits totaling 35 gold coins, which Alan separates from the money in his pouch and receives praise from his tutor for a job well done. Now it's Elena's turn, who asks for 5 apples that cost 30 gold. Just like her brother, Elena separates the correct amount and also receives affection from her father. The seller compliments the children's ability to calculate, boosting the guardian's confidence, who politely returns the gesture. Next, they head to a bookstore because while Alan and Elena browse for something interesting, Takumi could buy a book that teaches him how to use the water magic he learned. Looking at one of the books, he sees that the 2 little ones are idle, so he explains that he is looking and interpreting the letters according to their meaning. As usual, the siblings are interested in learning. Meanwhile, an elderly lady approaches Takumi, charmed by the children's energy. Having overheard what he was saying, she comments that she has handwriting exercise books and illustrated books for children. Happy, the twins thank the lady for her help, and she also praises their tutor for their upbringing, making him feel bashful once again. As they leave the bookstore, Takumi confesses that it feels good to receive so many compliments because it indicates that he is on the right track with raising Elena and Alan. A day later, the White Wings group returns to the guild to resume work after some time. The mission was to find a black cat with white paws named Mina. Following the clue from the flyer, Takumi takes the twins to the place where Mina got lost. With the help of Jewel Feet and Bolt, everyone mobilizes to find the cat. Searching every alley corner and rooftop, White Wings spares no effort to achieve the goal, and Bolt provides great aerial support with his privileged view of the surroundings. Takumi finds a tabby cat but dismisses it since it's not the one they're looking for. Alan spots a black cat's tail, but it turns out to be another cat with white fur. Elena bumps into Feet, who was hiding in a neighborhood bush. After searching for a long time, the twins lose some enthusiasm, but Takumi tries to lift their spirits for one last push. Resuming the search, the team encounters all sorts of cats except the black one. After another unsuccessful round, the kids seem even more downhearted, so Takumi asks if they want to give up. This question reignites the little ones, who decide to go all the way. The tutor asks where they plan to look next, and the children and pets point in the same direction. After some time searching, they see a shadow passing in front of the group, soon revealing itself to be a black cat behind some barrels. Takumi compares it to the flyer drawing, and all the characteristics match perfectly. Before anything else, he warns the kids that approaching recklessly will scare the animal, so they need to sneak up quietly. The twins tiptoe toward Mina, who is trembling with fear and threatening to react violently. Alan then shakes his feather cord to attract the cat, calmly making Mina settle down in front of the dangling accessory. After retrieving the lost pet, the next step is to feed it, so Takumi takes some milk from his inventory. After that, they return to the guild and deliver the cat to its owner, who was waiting for the animal there. Alan and Elena, seeing the owner's reaction of such joy at having her beloved Mina back in her arms, feel a desire to find another lost pet to bring that same satisfaction by completing the task. After they ask Takumi, he inquires Luna if there is another job like this one. Unfortunately, there wasn't, but the receptionist suggests a goblin hunting job that is popping up in the neighboring village, terrorizing people and animals in the region. It's not exactly a mission for low ranks, but since the payment isn't great, more experienced adventurers don't want to take it. So after accepting the mission, they set off for another guild job on the backs of their animals. Arriving in the village, Jewel and Feet return to their smaller forms to avoid trouble, while Bolt remains calmly in the air. At the village gate, the guards seem suspicious of the travelers and greet them rudely. Takumi explains that he came with his adventurer group after accepting a mission from the Shireen Guild to hunt goblins, so the guard takes the outsider to the village chief. Inside the wall, Takumi comments that the guard guard is really vigilant with anyone arriving, and he responds that the goblin attacks have become more frequent, occurring several times a day. Upon reaching the destination, the chief thanks the youths for their help, while Takumi gets straight to the point and asks for information about the invaders. Before answering, the chief asks when the adventurer's companions will arrive, not believing he will face the goblins with just the team he brought. Takumi understands the concern because a young man and 2 kids don't exactly look like a professional extermination unit. To change the local leader's perception a bit, he shows his rank guild identity. Just then, a guard rushes in to report that the village is under attack. Takumi asks everyone to flee to a safe place because he will handle the situation. The chief questions if the adventurer will really take the children as they were running toward their tutor. Takumi explains that it's easier to protect them by his side than leaving them somewhere he can't necessarily control. Soon the region turns into absolute chaos and the village residents flee in search of shelter. A woman trips and is at the mercy of a goblin, so the foreign adventurer repels the creature with an air shot and rescues her. Before releasing the kids into action, Takumi asks them to be careful. Aside from the kids, he also lets the animals join the fight, but asks the 2 quadrupeds to stay in their reduced forms. Without delay, the quintet charges at the invading goblins and defeats most of them until the group's leader spots the largest enemy so far, a goblin soldier that looks menacing. Because of this, the boy decides to take on this opponent himself, but Alan and Elena anticipate him and jump kick the monster, taking it down without any issues. After the battle, Takumi gathers the team to praise everyone until he hears a voice coming from Jewel through telepathy. After defeating the goblins, the wolf gained this ability. After the initial shock, the first thing Takumi asks is not to be called Master, which Jewel did upon gaining his voice. He prefers to be called by his name simply. Jewel isn't too fond of the idea, so Alan and Elena advise the animal to call Takumi Uncle, just like they do, which pleases the wolf. Soon after, Feet calls the young man Sir Uncle, while Bolt calls him Boss. Delighted, Takumi is thrilled to see the animals talking, and to confirm that Feet is indeed female as he suspected. Now that they can talk, the animals express their desire to strengthen their bonds even more with the children, who jump with joy at hearing this. In the end, Alan's lessons to teach the animals to speak paid off. As usual, Takumi pats the twins on the head for their excellent work. Now that they can talk, the animals also want head pats, which they get without any problems. However, despite the moment of camaraderie, smoke appears in the village, so Bolt flies to check the source. Before joining him, Takumi presumes it's time to put his water magic into practice, after spending the night reading the basics about this type of spell in the book he bought. Upon reaching the source of the fire, Kayano Takumi focuses his mana in his hands to create a water ball. Despite his confidence, the magic turned out like a paper airplane on a windless afternoon. Embarrassed, he tries again, performing the same move and throwing the water ball, but once again nothing happens. On the 3rd try, he strikes a sinister pose and uses both hands separately to conjure 2 water balls. Upon launching them, Takumi experiences the same embarrassment as before. Crestfallen, the boy lowers his head and asks Jewel to extinguish the fire. Effortlessly, the wolf seemed like a 4-legged fire truck as he put out the fire, while Takumi sulked in the beginnings of a mild depression due to the frustrating mishaps. Following their uncle's example, Alan and Elena pat him on the head, reminding him he's not alone in this. With everything resolved, the adventurers bid farewell to the village, collect their reward at the guild, and head home for a well-deserved rest. After all, he spent the whole day chasing a cat with the kids and killing a horde of goblins. Takumi thought the twins would be exhausted, but they soon appear, asking their uncle to read to them, proving once again that kids have an extra tank of energy. The book was about ocean fish, something the kids didn't know, so Takumi had an idea. The next morning, he informs Shirene's captains that he will be leaving the city to show the kids the world, starting with Bailey, the southern beach town. Upon receiving this news, Isaac comments that Vault couldn't hide his joy upon discovering that Takumi and the kids wouldn't be leaving the kingdom since Bailey isn't far. The captain confesses it would be good to have those 3 around in case Shirene gets invaded. After that, it was time to say goodbye to Luna, who, addicted to rare materials, only wanted to know about the items that would be on her table when the adventurer returned. Next, White Wings asks Michelle and Rode the Baker family for a favor: a large batch of cream-filled bread and anpan, as well as kukuru nut bread made in a special mold he prepared. They soon stop by the clothing store and receive a farewell gift outfit from the owner. Finally, Finally, Takumi goes to the shrine to inform Sil of the trip, and the god is sad because the human hasn't visited him much lately. With this in mind, Takumi promises to find a statue of the wind deity to communicate with him when he reaches the Southern Ocean. However, as they leave the shrine, a man claims the children are his property. They recall when the merchant used them as bait when monsters attacked the carriage. Thrown violently to the ground, they were left for dead before the wild wolves. This trauma makes it impossible for the children to hide their fear when they encounter this man again, who continues to shout that they are his property. Takumi checks the man's status and discovers he is a slave trader. Takumi responds that the two little ones are his siblings, not the ones the man is looking for. This only enrages the man further, as the pair of twins are unmistakable. As the slave trader rants, Takumi, who doesn't know exactly what happened, begins to assume that it was this individual who left Alan and Elena to serve as bait. After all, slavery exists in Ateldia, and slaves are marked with a magical contract to prove their status, although the twins don't have this mark. Regardless, Takumi's hatred for the man is undeniable for what he did to two defenseless children. But it's not time to prioritize his anger. He needs to protect the two. At that moment, the city patrol arrives to check the situation, and the trader accuses Takumi of stealing his merchandise. The guards ask what was stolen, and when the man answers, they dislike hearing how he refers to the children. Takumi asks for proof that the two belong to the trader, since neither has a slave mark. When the trader runs out of arguments, Takumi seizes the opportunity to accuse him of trying to kidnap the children using the false claim of ownership. The guards are uncertain what to do until Vault and Isaac coincidentally appear and resolve the issue immediately. After the man is taken to the precinct, the captains explain that they only came to bid farewell to Takumi, and the children assuring Takumi that he need not worry because they testified that Alan and Elena are indeed the adventurer's siblings. This way, they can never be called slaves again. Takumi makes it clear to the two that he will always be by their side, taking care of them through thick and thin. Alan and Elena start to cry and hug their uncle. During the official farewell, Isaac gives Takumi an invitation from Lord Bailey, which should be used for any assistance the Lord can provide in the southern coastal city. Since the officials have influence in the region, they take the opportunity to protect the three travelers. Finally, Takumi asks the little ones to say goodbye to the knights, which they do reluctantly, and Isaac comments that there's no need to force them, as they've just been through a tough time and are still withdrawn. On the way to Bailey City, Takumi thinks about what he could do to distract the kids, as they are visibly downcast. He soon announces that the White Wings group will pass through the forest of Gaia. Upon arrival, the young man ensures no one is around and releases all the animals to cheer up the children and carry them on their backs to Bailey, since the journey will be long. Excited, Jewel and Feet agree to help, while Bolt is tasked with flying and identifying if anyone is nearby, as the human does not want to be seen traveling with several ranks monsters to avoid suspicion. With that said, everyone mounts the animals and continues the journey. Early in the run, Bolt tries to warn in time, but a blood bear suddenly appears near the group. The bird immediately dives to attack the beast's eye, while Jewel and Feet finish the job with their claws. Another bear appears nearby, and Takumi's animals quickly resolve the issue again, but they ask for a pat as thanks for the well-done job. The wolf was about to lick Elena, but Takumi stops him just in time, as the wolf and tigress bit the bears and have dirty mouths which could transmit diseases to the children. Therefore, the adventurer uses his cleaning spell and quickly bathes the tamed beasts, who then take the opportunity to lick the children. As hours pass, after facing more creatures along the way, the White Wings manage to cross the forest of Gaia before the end of the day and soon set up camp for the night. Takumi asks what the children want to eat, and they excitedly request cream bread. The tutor explains that this type of bread is not suitable for dinner, so he promises to make it for breakfast. Since the twins were obedient, Takumi suggests an oyakodon, a dish the little ones are unfamiliar with. He explains that it's rice with an egg on top, making the twins happy just thinking about it. Overhearing the conversation, the animals don't want to be left out and ask to try this oyakodon too. By evening, the meal is served to anyone who wants it, and Alan and Elena realize that the dish is quite different from what they imagined, as they thought it would literally be an egg with a shell on a portion of rice. Nevertheless, they assure they'll eat it all just like the animals who dive into the food without hesitation. Additionally, Jewel and Feet revert to their smaller forms to eat slowly and savor every bite. As night falls, everyone sleeps safely in the magical tent, while Takumi stays awake to gaze at the starry sky after so long. 3 moons share the sky in Ateldia, 1 red, 1 yellow, and 1 blue. The yellow and red are visible this time of year, and the young man is captivated by the sight. Just 2 months after arriving in Ateldia, Takumi has done more than he ever did on his home planet, yet it all seems to have passed in the blink of an eye. At dawn, the group sets off after a simple breakfast. When they reach Bailey, the children break into huge smiles upon seeing the ocean for the first time. Takumi explains that the water is salty, so Elena asks if it tastes good. Takumi warns that it's not a good idea to drink the water, so the twins need to be very careful. Despite this, with their eyes fixed on the ocean, Alan and Elena turn to their tutor and ask again if they can drink the water. Takumi guesses their curiosity stems from wanting to discover what the sea is, so he lets them dip their fingers in and taste it to get a reality check. When they do, the twins understand why their uncle didn't want them to drink it. With a terrible taste in their mouths, they see the animals approaching and quickly lose their sour expressions, running with the creatures to explore the beach in the best way possible. From a distance, Takumi hears a female voice near him, but has no idea where it came from. Looking around, he doesn't see a living soul on the sand until he turns his eyes to the sea and notices a girl. Thinking she's drowning, he gets ready to jump into the water without a second thought, even though he can't find a float or anything like that in his inventory. He asks the girl to wait, and then she calls him by name, leaving him confused. She introduces herself as Milena the mermaid. Not quite believing it, Takumi analyzes her status and sees that she's not lying. Milena explains that a servant of the water god told her about him, and Takumi wonders if this servant could be the one who sent Jewel and all those gifts through Syl. Then the children arrive and ask their uncle who the lady is. Takumi explains that she's a mermaid, while the kids think the ocean ate half of her. Milena introduces herself and mentions she's also heard about them, which startles the two. Speaking of which, Takumi asks the mermaid to explain the story, and she reveals that she heard the human would help her race by solving the problem they're facing, so she invites the group to follow her to the mermaid village to discuss the details. Takumi asks everyone to stay calm, pointing out that this village is likely underwater, and assuming the mermaid didn't know this, none of them can breathe underwater. Takumi personally doesn't know how to swim, but decides to keep this fact to himself to avoid embarrassment. On second thought, considering Syl had improved his status so much, Takumi wonders if he can swim now. As for the twins, he has no doubt they'd learn as soon as they tried, but Milena solves the situation by giving 3 magic bracelets to the human. Made of mermaid scales, these accessories allow the wearer to breathe underwater and create a thin layer over the body to keep it dry. Even so, Takumi says he'd love to see Milena's village, but isn't sure he can solve the problem she mentioned. Still, the mermaid insists, so Takumi places the animals in his shadow and gives the bracelets to the children. Without wasting time, they jump into the sea, and while the twins have fun in the water for the first time, Takumi is amazed that he's not getting wet. The 3 of them dive in but make a face. Milena asks if everything's okay, and Takumi realizes he was holding his breath out of habit. He also notices he can speak underwater, something he never imagined. Meanwhile, the children are having a blast at the bottom of the ocean, swimming like fish despite it being their first time. Thinking about this, Takumi decides to try his luck after a lifetime of failures. Flailing his arms and legs like crazy, he ends up bumping his head into the mermaid's belly. Looking more closely at her, he sees the fishtail on her body with scales and all, and realizes she really is a mermaid. Realizing his awkward stare might be taken the wrong way, he explains he was just surprised by the discovery. Unfazed, Milena continues on, so the human asks what kind of monsters live at the bottom of the ocean. She replies that there are sand crabs and hammerhead fish, but none are very strong. Speaking of which, a shark with something like a hammer on its head speeds through the sea, but Takumi doesn't see the animal as a big threat as long as the hammer is avoided. Sneaking behind the tutor, the children debut their underwater flying kick on the shark, spinning it down into the ocean. With this, the tutor discovers that even underwater the kids don't lose their leg strength. After they collect the fish to eat later, a crab shows up. Although quite large, the crustacean can't withstand the twins' playful spirit. Easily, Alan and Elena slam the poor creature's neck into a rock, ending its life instantly. After the job is done, Takumi announces they'll have seafood for lunch today. After the meal, the group continues on. Suddenly, Takumi feels like he passed through a barrier, and Milena draws his attention to the village ahead. Enchanted by the beauty of the place, Takumi learns that the crystal forming the village structures is called prismarine, formed when the ocean crystallizes. Additionally, this crystal contains a power within it. Milena explains that the village is called the Blue Palace because of the sea's color. Before showing the interior, the mermaid wants to take them to the back of the castle first. There, the humans see a huge ship stuck at the entrance of the cave where the mermaids grow corals. They've tried every way to remove the ship, but it continues blocking access to the cave. However, the high priestess of the Blue Palace heard from the water god's servant that Lord Takumi could solve the problem. Thinking it over, Takumi guesses he might be able to put the ship in his inventory despite its size. In the blink of an eye, the ship becomes a menu item for the adventurer, impressing everyone around. The ship's description reveals its name is Dietland, and that everyone on board at the time of the shipwreck escaped alive. Without delay, the village's mermaids and mermen gather around the human to thank him, and two mermaids go to check if the corals are alive because they are the raw material for various medicines, especially one that cures a disease affecting the entire species. As for Takumi, Milena wishes to take him to the high priestess. After marveling at the palace's interior, the humans arrive at the priestess's door and are even more amazed by her appearance. Takumi thinks the young woman resembles Ottoheim from fairy tales, and the children aren't shy about expressing how beautiful they find her. The guardian of the little ones formally thanks her for the invitation, but the girl emphasizes that she owes a lot to the three of them, because the servant of the water god mentioned having a great debt to them. Moreover, Milena mentions that Takumi resolved the ship issue, further enhancing the prestige of the White Wings group in that setting. The priestess even declares outright that they are in the presence of the heroes of the Ocean Palace. Despite the recognition he gained among those people, the boy always values anonymity, so he doesn't want to draw much attention. The priestess seems to understand this, clarifying that only the people present in this room know what Takumi and the children did. Speaking of which, the priestess seems quite eager to highlight how kind the young man was with his actions, a type of reaction he isn't very good at handling. Galdo, the leader of the Mermaid and Merman Society, tells the girl she's making the guest a bit uncomfortable, but she feels it's important to express the truth about the significance of this man's deeds. Galdo uses the example of a time when someone bluntly told the priestess she was immature, which she certainly didn't appreciate. So the young cleric from the deep sea understands that not everything that crosses our minds should necessarily be said. At that moment, acknowledging she went too far, she introduces Galdo as the leader of the Sea People, despite Takumi having heard that the priestess was the one in charge. She explains that she holds an honorary title due to her greater affinity with the gods. After all, a being of such importance is rare enough to appear only once per generation. In truth, the person holding this position is more of a symbol for someone much more sacred. Honestly, the girl confesses she doesn't particularly enjoy occupying this title. Regardless, the high priestess announces that she has a gift for the heroes. Takumi shows his natural humility, but the people insist on rewarding the group for what they've done. Thinking it over, the human recalls his failed attempt to use water magic, thinking it would be interesting to develop that part of himself which remains so weak. So, he musters the courage to ask for help with this kind of skill, and Galdo offers to assist. The priestess insists that this training is something beyond the reward, but the boy prefers to leave it at that, as he feels this help is already enough. Milena suggests an idea to the priestess, leading her to offer something not useful to her people. She takes the white wings to a heap of braca algae, widely used as ingredients for compresses to reduce fever and treat burns. Additionally, there was rock shell, which, when crushed into powder, could serve as a cleaning agent. Lastly, there were giant shark bones used as raw material for weapons. However, beyond the materials shown, The children grabbed some pearls of various colors that were among them, and the high priestess courageously admits that this place is actually the mermaids' dump. The mermaids are embarrassed to reveal this to the humans, but they feel amazed to have access to such spectacular items as if they were nothing to this society. For instance, these pearls are worthless jewels because they aren't transparent and shiny enough. The priestess points out that while these items aren't a big deal for them, the servant of the water god mentioned they are very valuable to humans. Since the children like them, Takumi accepts the gifts and receives an invitation to spend the night at the Blue Palace. First of all, they are treated to a grand banquet filled with seafood and music, allowing the humans to learn more about the culture and customs of that underwater civilization. Takumi feels so good that he starts to think he's being treated like the legendary Urashima Taro, even wondering if he might turn into an old man when he returns to the surface. When the children praise the food, the boy imagines himself older, and the two little ones already adult. In his mind, this seemed too soon, so much so that he hugs the children, as if wishing they would stay young forever. Next, they take a tour of the palace and look through the glass windows displaying the beauty of the ocean around them, with all the fish and plants they don't usually see on the surface. Seeing some swimming animals, Alan and Elena think they should kick the creatures, just as they do with anything that crosses their path, but their tutor asks them to remain calm in such moments, emphasizing the importance of observing the animals with curiosity as if they were in an aquarium. For example, a ray, jellyfish, and other species they had no idea existed passed by. Some time later, after achieving more than they ever imagined possible, the White Wings trio is taken back to the surface by Galdo to start their training in water element magic. As the first lesson, he teaches that there are two ways to manifest this style of sorcery: manipulation and creation, citing an example. When using earth magic, this involves manipulating the nearby earth and air. On the other hand, for water or fire magic, one must first create these elements, as they might not necessarily be around. Takumi grasps the concept, although Alan and Elena seem lost in the lesson. Explaining the essence of this type of magic, the mermaid leader asks Takumi to demonstrate what he can do. The boy approaches the sea and uses his ability, Water Pillar, literally raising an enormous pillar of water before him, startling the children. Observing their fear, Galdo takes advantage of their lack of magical knowledge to teach the concept of magical flow. First, he asks for their hands and releases an energetic mass near the children's bodies. He explains that this is mana, the source of all magical power and energy that flows within each individual. The master asks if the boys can feel it, and then Takumi gives them a little push, urging them to feel a warmth inside their bodies after Galden took their hands. At the same time, Takumi realizes that the power he had been using from inside out had a name, mana, and that it's a distinct type of energy within his body. Speaking of which, the twins do feel the mana, which makes Galden happy before continuing the lesson. He asks the two to take some water and gather mana to manipulate this matter in their hands. First, he demonstrates, while the priestess appears to emphasize that mastering this type of art is a great challenge, so much so that Galden himself says it takes him half a day just to form a sphere of water. As the children are already feeling the mana within themselves, this is a spectacular indicator, and Takumi acknowledges that the little ones are indeed very talented. Next, it's time for Galden to see Takumi's water ball, the ability that had caused him so much embarrassment. The master asks the human to throw this magic at a rock, so Takumi follows the instructions and summons a water sphere that far surpasses any previous attempt he has ever had in his life. When the rock shatters, his adopted children get excited and want to try it too, and Galden seems pleased with the children's youthful enthusiasm. Without hesitation, Elena and Alan accumulate their mana and gather enough energetic mass to produce a water ball that hits another rock like cannonballs. Behind them, Galden and the priestess are impressed with the incredible talent the two little ones display. After the lessons, when they are alone on the surface, Takumi, Alan, and Elena decide to practice a bit to develop their skills. The twins show their extremely natural ability as always, and Takumi gets excited as he praises these true prodigy siblings. Taking advantage of the practice, Takumi imagines that being able to conjure a wall of water would be very useful. However, the training is interrupted when the boys sense a presence around them even though nothing is visible to the naked eye. Considering this, Takumi uses his detection ability, but what emerges from underwater dispenses any need for such intervention. Meanwhile, Sil pressures Maya, the servant of the water goddess, to spill what's happening, and she reveals that she noticed a problem in the mermaid region while she was searching for Takumi, Alan, and Elena. Shyle imagines that the ship stranded in the coral dungeon must have been quite a hassle, but doesn't think the oracle should have been handed over to the human just because of that, since the oracle is a way for the gods to intervene in the human world. Apparently, Sil's followers are only accumulating debts of gratitude with that human, and Maya is one of those responsible for this. Sil doesn't want them to depend on Takumi for everything, so he doesn't want his followers turning to the human for any little thing. Nevertheless, when he tries to relax to eat something, Sil blames Windell, the god of water, for forgetting everything wherever he goes. By the way, Sil supports Takumi and even brought that human to this world, but deep down he questions why he made such a blunder out of the blue. The man who served the wind god considers that this human has something special that other people don't, which is why no one would refuse to support him and the children. Speaking of which, the man points out that Yakumi and the twins seem to be in trouble. In fact, the White Wings are in trouble due to the arrival of a gigantic creature from the depths of the sea. Analyzing the monster's status, Takumi discovers that it is a leviathan, a water dragon. Interestingly, the dragon doesn't attack humans, a fact Takumi doesn't understand. In truth, the leviathan felt something unusual and went to investigate. Through telepathy, the creature announces that it found a servant of the wind god along with 2 children of the water god. Takumi didn't know this, so he becomes curious about the origin of his adopted children. The dragon reveals that it was responsible for taking care of these children, but didn't consider the fact that it is a sea creature and would devastate any city it passed through. However, now it has the chance to fulfill this role, now that it is before the offspring of its god near the maritime domains. Thus, the dragon asks the human to seal a contract so it can be summoned when necessary, even though the leviathan might not always agree to appear. For this to happen, the man must give the beast a name, so Takumi chooses to call it Kaiser. With that, the agreement between the parties is sealed, and the leviathan now becomes part of the White Wings group as another protector of the water god's children. By the way, Kaiser comments that the children like the boy as if he were their father, but Takumi emphasizes that he is seen more as an older brother. Suddenly, the dragon surprises everyone by inviting the children to go with him, as they have seen enough to join the marine life. Kaiser assures that he will provide a safe and comfortable place for the boys. After all, a dragon is more suited to ensure the safety of such important beings than a mere human. Despite this, the children don't want to leave Takumi, and the leviathan doesn't ignore their feelings, quite the contrary. Hearing their demand, Kaiser just wanted to confirm with the children that they truly want to stay with this guardian. Takumi acknowledges that he is weaker than the dragon, but promises never to let go of Alan and Elena's hands no matter what. Trusting the human's word, Kaiser asks to be contacted via telepathy if anything happens. Additionally, he gives the boy a magical scale that will inform the dragon where the trio is. With this decided, the dragon gives the 3 a ride across the ocean and the maritime snow until they return to the Blue Palace. Upon arrival, Takumi asks the little ones if they truly want to stay with him, and they demonstrate more than ever that they never want to leave their new uncle's side. Upon arriving at the palace, the twins excitedly blurt out that they rode on Kaiser. Meyer and Milna, puzzled, ask who that is, so Takumi quickly invents a story about a fish they encountered along the way that gave them a ride. The kids then mention that the journey was incredibly bright, which confuses the girls even more. Takumi explains that there were white particles floating around them during the trip resembling snowflakes. With that said, he informs them that he's heading out, and Maya hands him a lunchbox for them to share. Shortly after, they bid farewell to the two and set off back to the ocean. On their way to the surface, the group spots a giant crab. Without warning, the twins pounce on it, prompting Takumi to realize they'll be having crab stew tonight. As they swim, they stumble upon a mysterious door leading to a deep labyrinth and decide to take a chance and explore the place. Upon finding a small opening to the surface, Takumi emerges from the water and spots a teleportation device. He opens the map in his menu and sees sees that they are in the 53rd labyrinth called Sazanami. This labyrinth has 30 floors with teleporters every 10 floors. Takumi asks the kids if they want to explore the area or head home to rest. He eventually decides they'll explore up to the 10th floor, but after that they'll return home and come back another day to pick up where they left off. But before starting the adventure, Takumi opens the lunchbox for them to eat and fill their bellies. After lunch, they proceed to the first floor where they encounter poisonous frogs. Takumi warns them that these frogs can spew venom, so he instructs the kids to use magic instead of getting close. With his air shot, he hits the first frog while the twins try to strike the frogs with water balls but miss. The kids throw a tantrum over missing their targets, so Takumi encourages them to try again. This time they successfully hit the frogs and celebrate their victory together. On the second floor, Takumi notices something suspicious on the wall and uses his evaluate skill to check for possible traps. Instead, he discovers a hidden room. Inside, there's a shell-shaped chest that the kids eagerly want to open, so their uncle lets them go ahead. The chest contains a large quantity of shrimp, which the twins want to eat raw despite never having seen it before. Takumi urges them to be patient, saying he'll cook it later, and stores all the shrimp in his inventory. Next to it, there's another chest which holds dried fish flakes, also known as katsuboshi. As usual, the kids want to devour it right away, but Takumi explains that it tastes great when added to food. He also mentions that he's a big fan of cooking and is more than satisfied with these peculiar rewards from the Sazanami labyrinth. In other chests, they discover portions of white shrimp, Japanese clams, kombu, and wake, just an array of seafood that the trio stores in their inventory. As they prepare to descend to the 6th floor, Takumi realizes it's getting late, so he decides to stop for dinner. Sifting through his inventory like a child choosing a toy to play with, Takumi goes through the food options until he settles on the crab, which he pairs with the katsuboshi to make stew. He cooks the 2 types of shrimp with salt and mixes them into the stew, delighting the kids with the flavor. After dinner, they sleep as usual inside the magic tent, and the next day they resume exploring the labyrinth from where they left off. As they descend the stairs to the 6th floor, they immediately spot a giant oyster, which the kids rush to attack without a second thought. However, Takumi explains that this oyster releases shocks when struck by any impact, so they need to attack from a distance. Alan and Elena conjure their water balls and hurl them at the creature, defeating it without much resistance. Impressed by how easily the two overcame the oyster's tough shell, Takumi checks their status, something he hadn't done in a while, and sees that they've earned the titles Children of the Water God and Low-Level Labyrinth Conquerors. Moreover, both Alan and Elena have reached level 25, while Takumi is at level 27, making him realize with a bit of shock that these little ones are going to surpass him soon, which wouldn't be ideal. While inspecting the item dropped by the oyster, Alan and Elena find a party popper, an item their uncle never expected to find there. The kids want to know how it works, so Takumi explains that you just pull the string and it makes a loud noise. Without delay, the two position themselves to test it out, and upon pulling the string, a loud bang is heard along with confetti in various colors shooting out of the popper. The twins are immediately frightened by the sound and start crying. Further on, they encounter another oyster, and this time Elena and her brother launch water balls at it with a hint of vengeance, still upset from the earlier scare. Once again, the oyster drops a party popper, which Takumi decides to take, thinking it might come in handy for some reason, much to the kids' dismay. Eventually, they reach the 10th floor, and Takumi assesses that this is likely the boss floor of the labyrinth. He tells the kids to stay alert before opening the door. Inside the mysterious chamber, wooden bridges connect one part of the floor to another, divided by water of unknown depth. The kids are thrilled by how funny the bridge reacts to their steps, so they start running around to play, making Takumi nervous, especially since he just sensed the presence of a monster. As if on cue, several needlefish attack the group, and Takumi defends himself with his wind cutter ability, slicing through the creatures in his path. At the same time, Elena and Alan hurl water balls in every direction, and after a barrage of repeated attacks, they defeat defeat all the needlefish and clear the boss room. With that, a staircase is created leading to the next floor, but before moving on, the twins collect the magical stones dropped by the monsters along with some needlefish fillets, spears, and arrows. With their loot gathered, the group is ready to continue until Elena notices something strange in the water. Perplexed, Takumi uses his detection ability, and since he doesn't sense any monsters at the bottom, he asks the little ones if they want to dive in. Without hesitation, they jump into the water and find a large chest at the bottom which contains a mermaid bracelet just like the ones they wear. Takumi then deduces that from this level upward the items are starting to become rarer, and if they find more bracelets he could distribute them among his animals as well. Next, they continue their journey toward the next stage, where there was a teleportation device just as he had imagined. Takumi had agreed that they would explore up to the 10th floor and then return home, so he informs the children that they need to head back to the first floor and go to Bailey tomorrow. The next day they arrive in the city and are amazed by the beauty of the place. Takumi remembers that Isaac Risner had given him an invitation to deliver to the local lord, but first he wants to take a look around. They immediately head to the street market, where some scallops from a vendor look delicious. Takumi asks if the vendor uses salt to season them, and he confirms that he does. The boy asked because while he likes salt, he prefers his own seasonings, so he wants to take 3 without any seasoning. When the dishes are placed in front of him, the boy drizzles butter over the food and pours hot soy sauce, which melts the butter around the scallop, and serves the children. Impressed by the stranger's culinary skills, the vendor recognizes the butter but can't identify the sauce. Takumi explains that it's a soy sauce made from koikuchi trees and offers some for the man to taste. The vendor is so blown away by the flavor that his reaction catches the attention of everyone around, who now also want to try some of the scallop with butter and soy sauce. Immediately, the children protect their food, fearing that someone might try to snatch it, although Takumi reassures them that no one will. The vendor asks the young man to sell him some of the sauce and a bit of butter, so Takumi strikes a deal and watches as people line up to try the special scallop. After everything is sold out, the man closes his stall and comments that he's never sold out so quickly since he started working. Because of this, he decides to make his own sauce. So he packs up his things and sets out in search of the necessary ingredients after getting Takumi's permission to replicate his recipe. Next, the White Wings group visits the blacksmith in Bailey and asks him to polish the scale that Kaiser had given them. Obviously, the blacksmith notices that this is not something you find just anywhere, so Takumi lies that it was a gift he received. The blacksmith jokes, asking if the guy is friends with Elon Musk to receive such a valuable present, but Takumi prefers to keep the origin of the item a secret. He wants the blacksmith to make a hole and attach a cord to the scale, but the blacksmith warns that there's a risk of breaking it. Therefore, he calls Rudy, his employee who has experience in crafting, and asks if the guy can make an ornament with the water dragon scale on the table. Rudy is shocked when he sees the item in the forge and says that maybe he can make the pendant the customer desires. He quickly sketches a sample of how the scale would look after the whole process, and both Takumi and the children like what they see. However, Rudy warns that the silver or bronze support would be weaker than the scale itself, so they would need to use materials strong enough to create this piece, which would certainly drive up the final price. Takumi asks what materials those would be, and the blacksmith craftsman explains that the ideal choice would be mithril, which luckily for the customer they still have a bit of in the shop. Additionally, Takumi asks if it's possible to use something like a leather cord instead of a chain, which Rudy confirms, but he thinks that doing so would make the leather look cheap compared to the rest, creating a strange contrast. Therefore, he recommends a strand of mithril spider, but the boss believes there's no way to get such a material. Thinking it over, Takumi remembers that he received something similar among the items Syl gave him, so he quickly pulls the item from his inventory and places it in front of the blacksmith, who panics upon seeing the kind of thing this guy carries in his pocket. The boss steps in to calm the employee down, but has the same reaction when he sees the mithril spider before him. Embarrassed, Takumi didn't even know that this thing was so rare, and putting that aside, he asks Rudy to make 3 pendants so that he and the children can have a water blessing. Rudy wants to tweak some details on each pendant, so Takumi asks the children how they want theirs. Elena says she wants hers to be cute, but Alan has no idea, so the decision is left to the blacksmith. By the way, Takumi asks if the professionals could create armor with the materials he provides, such as serpent maligna leather, another rare item him that leaves the shop's employees even more surprised. Given this, the head blacksmith comments that you really can't judge someone by their appearance, and Takumi recalls hearing the same thing from the guild master. By the way, he also wants gloves for gathering a breastplate and leather gauntlets because he has a falcon and needs to protect his arm when Bolt lands on it. Speaking of which, Alan asks if he can get a glove like that too because he wants Bolt to land on his arm. With everything ordered, they say goodbye to the blacksmiths and continue on their way to a temple where they could speak with Syl. Upon arrival, the adventurer tells the wind god that the twins are the children of the water god. Syl apologizes for not telling him earlier, but that's not the issue Takumi came to discuss. He wants to know where the children's father is. If you're enjoying this journey, don't forget to hit that like button. Your support helps motivate me to keep bringing you each episode. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. See you in the next episode.